Did you know that while Imu's power is translated as omen in English, in Japanese it is written as Maki, with the kanji being a literal play on the word haki. Both words have the exact same kanji for the word ki, meaning spirit energy, and the only thing that changes is the kanji for ha and ma, with ha meaning supremacy or dominance, and ma meaning evil or demonic. Essentially, Imu's power Maki is a direct parallel to haki, and not just in a sort of funny naming convention way, and not even just in terms of what it symbolically represents, as an evil twist on the concept of haki, but rather literally in terms of how Imu's power works. Imu's explanation of Maki is a one-to-one mirror of Rayleigh's explanation of haki, that it seems most readers haven't yet put together. Rayleigh explains that haki is a power that dwells in all living beings, just as Imu explains that Maki is a power that dwells in all living beings. However, the difference is the nature of that power. Rayleigh tells us that haki is essentially the strength of one's conviction, and this mirrors what we've been told since the beginning of the story, that conviction is the most powerful weapon that one can wield, that the strength of one's conviction is what gives one the potential to become the strongest in the world. And we've seen over and over that those with the strongest drive throughout the series, whether that drive is to be the freest, or to protect one's family, or to protect one's friends, or to become the king of the pirates, one's conviction in one's goals is the essence of powerful haki. But Imu's explanation of Maki is actually that same exact concept, but with a dark twist. Maki is also the representation of commitment to one's goals, but the difference is that Maki's power is rooted in envy. The powerful drive to achieve one's goals born out of envy is the essence of Maki, and it is this power that Imu wields as his military might. Philosophically, one could think of the difference as if someone said, "I am extremely driven in my goal to become a great artist," well then that drive would translate to haki. Whereas if someone said, "I am extremely envious of great artists, I crave what they have, I need to have what they have," then while that too would be a representation of extreme drive, that drive now comes from a more sinister place. And putting this together perfectly paints the picture of what Imu himself represents as a villain. Remember, throughout One Piece, Oda has always given his villains powers that directly reflect their own nature. For example, Doflamingo is a master manipulator who controls Dressrosa and the underworld, hence his abilities are puppeteer strings. Lucci was the silent assassin revealed to be hiding in plain sight, hence he was a leopard. Wapol was a greedy king, hence his power was gluttony. Moria was a broken shadow of his former self, hence his powers were shadows, so on and so forth. And Imu? Well, we know that Imu was once one of 20 kings, who was deeply envious of the previous king of the world, Davy Jones. And we know that during Imu's time, the Ancient Kingdom was above all the other kingdoms. It seems that Imu so desperately coveted the role of the king of the world for himself that his entire journey was defined by envy, rallying 19 other kings to take down the Ancient Kingdom and erase Davy Jones from history so that Imu could take the world for himself and become the new king of the world, a drive born entirely out of envy of the previous king. Hence, Oda symbolically gave Imu the power of not only haki, but this unique ability Maki, the dark counterpart of haki that represents the power of envy rather than pure conviction. And with this understanding of the basis of Imu's powers, it also follows how the rest of Imu's abilities work, from Domi Reversi to the Covenants, to even the truth behind the weapons that Imu has gained from all 20 kings. So before we begin unraveling the mysteries of Imu, make sure to subscribe. But first, if you love One Piece, you probably also love JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And now you can play the first ever mobile, globally released JoJo's RPG, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Spirit, the sponsor of this video. This game is an absolute dream for JoJo's fans. It lets you build an all-star team, mixing together characters from across the JoJo series. You can see the previews showcasing faithfully recreated stand battles, iconic anime moments, and there are even some fun, unique interactions. The game officially launches worldwide on August 13th, but you can go pre-register right now for iOS and Android. Pre-registering helps unlock community milestone rewards. And the final reward is everyone gets access to Stardust Crusaders Joseph Joestar. Oh my god! And to celebrate the countdown to launch, the game just released a brand new music PV trilogy featuring original music by Yugo Kanno, the composer behind Stardust Crusaders and Steel Ball Run. So click the link in the description to pre-register on iOS or Android, check out the new music PVs, and get ready for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Spirit when it launches August 13th. So that aside, to begin with, Imu has 3 core components of his powers, and everything else ties back into this. As he explained, corruption, covenants, and Maki. Looking at Maki first, what's most interesting in how it functions is that the closest comparison is actually the Yami Yami no Mi. Whereas Haki seems to be able to overpower devil fruits so long as the Haki of the wielder is strong enough, Maki appears to be able to straight up cancel out even the most powerful devil fruit attacks, depending on how Imu wields it, much like the Yami Yami no Mi. Now Maki doesn't seem to outright negate devil fruit powers like the Yami Yami no Mi, but it falls somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Whereas Haki has to be very strong to overpower a devil fruit, and the Yami Yami no Mi basically automatically negates devil fruits with no effort, Maki seems to fall somewhere in the middle, where it is blatantly more effective at cancelling devil fruit attacks than Haki, but not quite as easily as the Yami Yami no Mi. We can see this as Imu has no trouble blocking the strongest attacks from Luffy with just Haki, but against Loki's fruit abilities, which are the most destructively powerful seen in the series so far, Imu instead opts to use Maki to simply cancel them out rather than engaging in a Haki clash. And in general, the pattern seems to be that for attacks that Imu considers to be weak, he doesn't bother to use Maki to block, and instead just uses Haki. Whereas for attacks that are extraordinarily powerful, he cancels those out with Maki. All of this leads me to believe that Imu's Maki is a power granted to him from his own devil fruit, as it's been strongly implied that his devil fruit may be the literal devil or sea devil fruit, which thereby gives him access to a dark alternative to Haki. This makes even more sense considering Imu's explanation of Maki is tied together with his explanation of his 2 other main abilities, Domi Reversi and Contract. Each of Imu's 3 primary powers reflect the powers that would typically be associated with the quote-unquote devil. Generally, the devil has been associated with preying on the weakness of man, giving powers to others in exchange for their soul, aka a deal with the devil. And so first we have Imu's power Domi Reversi, explained as the target turning evil as a result of gaining power too fast and too easily. Essentially the concept of power ultimately corrupts, turning anyone Imu targets with this into one of his demonic minions. What's most interesting about Domi Reversi is that it didn't work on Luffy and Loki. Now the easiest explanation for this is that this is because Luffy and Loki already have devil fruits themselves, and we've never really seen Domi Reversi work on any character who has their own devil fruit. And that would make sense conceptually, as Imu is essentially trying to grant the powers of the devil to characters who already in a way have the devil's power. However, an alternative explanation that may also be possible is that Imu is unable to perform Domi Reversi on any character who is fundamentally uncorruptible, and I certainly believe that Luffy and Loki would fall under this category. Because whereas someone like Rox, admirable as he is, could clearly be corrupted by the allure of power, as could most every normal human, Luffy and Loki have both been shown to have extraordinarily pure spirits. Luffy needs no explanation, and as for Loki, despite his many misdemeanors, he has always rejected the offer to become the king of Elbaf. He's accepted carrying the burdens of the nation and the sins of his father upon his shoulders. I think it's possible that this may be the true reason that Domi Reversi didn't work on either of them. Because if Imu knew in the first place that Domi Reversi didn't work on devil fruit users, then there would have been no point in Imu even attempting it in the first place. But if Imu simply suspected that it's likely that the Nika fruit and the Nidhogg fruit would have chosen modern day users who are uncorruptible, then it would make sense why Imu seems to have been testing out his theory that Domi Reversi wouldn't work on Luffy and Loki before acknowledging that his assumption was correct. The new Nika user and the new Nidhogg user are uncorruptible figures. Now the flip side of Domi Reversi is Imu's covenants. These are the devil's traditional power of making contracts in exchange for power. Now there's an interesting symbolic difference in how Domi Reversi works in comparison to the contracts. As Domi Reversi is a play on the idea that power inherently corrupts, it's implied that the causation is that suddenly being granted so much power is what turns Imu's targets evil, whereas with the contracts, the causation is reversed. Someone is voluntarily making a deal with Imu, asking for greater power in return for serving him. The classic deal with the devil. Now the end result is functionally the same. Imu gets a superpowered servant either way, but there's a different idea behind both that reflects real-world ideas. One represents how people may willingly sell their own souls, their own integrity for power, whereas the other represents how when someone gains too much power, even a previously good person can be changed and become evil due to the power going to their heads. That's why we see a clear difference in the types of characters Oda has undergo Domi Reversi compared to those who undergo the contract. Generally, it's legitimately evil or highly misled characters who sign up for the contract because they want more power, but Domi Reversi shows how even an ordinarily good person can become evil thanks to being granted so much power because power ultimately corrupts. Therefore, it's possibly only the rare individuals like Luffy who would never sell their soul for power and would also never become evil even if they were given absolute corrupting power, who Imu cannot turn no matter the method. And then lastly, of course, we have Maki, which completes the Trinity as a representation of how there is inherently great power in man's envy. The reality in both the One Piece world and in real life is that envy is a very powerful driver, even if it does stem from an evil place. This is why Domi Reversi and Covenants are powers that Imu can grant to others, whereas Maki is a power that is his own. Only Imu, the devil himself, can wield the mighty power of envy. And all of Imu's other various miscellaneous abilities, such as the Abyss, Gigantification, and so on, all seem to be applications of Maki. Maki can clearly do a great many things. Even teleportation seems to be Maki, as it is always marked by the traditional black flames of Maki. And so with all this in mind, that finally brings us to the swords of the former kings that Imu wields. But first, we're doing a huge summer sale, where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And we mean any 2 posters, because this month, all collections are on sale. The Island posters, the Ship posters, and the Legends posters. Just mix and match any posters you like from across all collections, and use code MORGE at checkout. We are offering this site-wide deal for August only, so if you've been waiting to get your hands on any of these collections, now is the time. So get your poster while this summer sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. So out of the 19 weapons that Imu should have access to, 9 have been revealed so far. Imu's own original weapon as one of the 19 kings is very likely this glaive that he normally uses. And interestingly, this weapon itself doesn't seem to have any special powers, but he seems able to transfigure it to some degree to the other king's blades momentarily, whereas other times Imu just straight up pulls out the other king's blades as he pleases. The other weapons that Imu's shown are the Blade of Judgment, Nemesis, which may legitimately be a black blade, as it first debuts in a manner that is visually a clear callback to Mihawk. So either this is simply black coloring due to Maki, or one of the first 20 kings actually had a black blade. The next sword Imu debuts is the Sword of Wrath, Gram. And while it's unclear whether or not this weapon inherently has powers, we see that Imu is able to coat this blade with Maki to deflect Loki's lightning, and it seems like even Sommers is able to channel Maki through it. The Blade of Hatred, Sigma, manifests as a gigantic smoky weapon that shoots out almost like a sniper rifle to strike Imu's target. The Blade of Nothingness, Void, of course is able to drain the life from everything around it, and interestingly the next blade, the Blade of the Sea God, Fragrach, does something very visually similar, causing a tree to wither away, but this may be a destructive ability rather than one that drains life. The Axe of Jingtian is the first non-sword weapon that we see Imu debut, and it appears to have fire-based abilities, and is apparently extremely lethal as Imu felt that this one Luffy clearly wouldn't survive. And finally we have the Spear of Long Ninus, whose abilities have yet to be shown. On top of all this, we've seen Imu pull out a few other weapons, notably debuting with a trident and even a gun, but it's yet to be confirmed if these were also weapons of the first 20 kings. So now all of this begs the question, how do these weapons work, and more importantly, why do they have special powers? Because really there are 2 possibilities here. Either the weapons themselves had powers in the first place, or they are a product of Imu's own powers, with Imu perhaps granting some abilities to the first 19 kings which he has now reclaimed for himself after their death. Well, what's confusing is that this has never really been a thing in One Piece. We have seen countless world-class weapons, and none of them can do things like intrinsically create fire or destroy objects, unless they themselves have eaten devil fruits. The only weapon that we've ever seen that arguably has a special effect without a devil fruit is Enma, which pulls out the user's haki. However, the weapons that Imu wields seem more typical of weapons that have eaten devil fruits. The only problem is that fruits like the fire fruit already exist, so it doesn't seem like devil fruit weapons are the answer. In that case, we narrow things down further. Either there was some mechanism or technique back in the second world to imbue weapons with powers without using devil fruits, or what we're seeing is a result of Imu's own abilities. Now, my personal theory is that considering Imu's most dangerous abilities seem to stem from granting power in exchange for allegiance, this may be the case here as well. After all, look at everything we've seen of the Gods Knights and the Gorosei. The more that we learn, the more that we realize that the majority of their powers aren't actually theirs. The God's Knights have all been granted regeneration by Imu. They've been granted increased strength by Imu. Some of them have been granted eternal life by Imu. It's even implied that the Gorosei have been granted monstrous transformations by Imu. Almost everything Imu's servants can do that makes them so dangerous is because they've sold their souls to Imu in exchange for power. And that's precisely why even when the God's Knights are losing, they don't really seem to win or turn things around thanks to their own strength. Rather, it's thanks to Imu giving his groveling servants even more powers. So I know that it's easy to imagine that the original 19 kings were these legendary badasses with mighty weapons, but I feel like this is more likely than not Celestial Dragon propaganda, because the whole messaging around Imu and the Celestial Dragons so far seems to be that at their core, these Celestial Dragons are pathetic. They are sellouts who cling to their master. He allows them to play act as the gods of the world in exchange for absolute subservience. And that's why I believe it's very likely that the story of the original 19 kings is very similar. Imu's own strength, the power that he wields through Maki, is extraordinary. But I believe that the true point of Imu as a character and what makes him so fearsome is that he represents the powers that the devil can grant to others if they are willing to sell their souls. The more people Imu can sink his claws into, the more his own power grows. I believe the story we've been painted so far is of a kingdom that was far greater than all other kingdoms, such that the many other kings of the world were envious. Imu preyed on that envy. That envy became his own power. He rallied the other kings against the ancient kingdom, promising them power in return. As they sold their souls to him one by one, they gained great power. And that is precisely what Imu leveraged to take down the ancient kingdom and anoint himself as the god of the world, while the rest of the kings got to pretend that they were also the gods of the world, and not merely his puppets. As such, with these legendary weapons, I question what power was used to create them. Maybe Imu could grant their weapons special powers in exchange for something else. Or perhaps if we want to go a step further, for all we know, maybe Imu literally bound the king's souls into the weapons themselves after they died, so that Imu could forever keep their powers with him, the kings ultimately becoming eternal tools for the devil that once manipulated them. Perhaps each weapon's abilities reflect the nature of that former king's soul, and the foolish celestial dragons of today are none the wiser, simply believing that their ancestors once wielded weapons with extraordinary powers. So let me know in the comments below what you believe the truth behind the weapons is, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear the strangest clue that the 19 Kings weapons weren't originally special, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon. Link in the description below.